The battlefield had finally gone quiet, which in Ryan's experience usually meant two things. Either the fighting was over, or something much bigger was about to start. He sincerely hoped it was the first one. His boots crunched over fragments of scorched alloy and shattered armor as the distant glow of orbiting ships flickered through the smoke-filled sky. Every few seconds, a damaged drone somewhere nearby let out a pitiful electronic whine before dying completely, like a robot sighing in disappointment at the universe. Ryan adjusted the strap of his medical pack and activated the soft blue beam of his scanner. The device hummed politely, which was the closest thing battlefield equipment had to manners. He swept the beam across the ruined terrain, watching for any flicker of life signs. "All right," he muttered to himself, stepping over the twisted frame of what used to be an armored walker. "Anyone still alive out here? Now would be a great time to wave or glow or do literally anything helpful." The scanner beeped. Ryan stopped. Well, that was suspiciously cooperative. He turned toward the signal and moved carefully between the wreckage. The battle had clearly been intense. Alien transport ships lay half buried in the ground, their smooth hulls cracked open like eggs. Strange violet sparks crawled across exposed circuitry. The air still smelled like hot metal and something vaguely citrus-like, which Ryan suspected was alien fuel. The scanner beeped again, louder this time. "There you are," Ryan said, kneeling beside the source of the signal. A figure lay partially sheltered against the broken wing of a transport craft. The armor she wore was sleek and unfamiliar, its silver lines glowing faintly even through the scorch marks. Ryan leaned closer and carefully turned her onto her back. He blinked once. Huh. She looked human. Almost perfectly human, actually. Pale skin, sharp features, long dark hair tangled across the ground. But her ears were long and elegantly pointed, sweeping back along her head in a way no human anatomy textbook had ever approved of. Ryan shrugged. "Alien battlefield," he said to no one in particular. "Alien soldier. This checks out." The scanner beeped rapidly now. "Easy, easy," Ryan murmured, already opening his medkit. "You're not dead yet, which is excellent news for both of us. Mostly you." He ran the scanner across her chest. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting a rough internal map of her injuries. Several fractures, internal bleeding, a puncture wound just below the ribs. Ryan let out a low whistle. "Well, that's impressive. I've seen people survive worse," he said after a pause. "But they were usually extremely lucky, or extremely stubborn. Hopefully you're both." He quickly injected a stabilizing serum into her arm. The tiny device hissed softly as it delivered the medication. "There we go," Ryan said. "Welcome to the exciting world of emergency medicine." The woman remained unconscious. Ryan began sealing the deeper wounds with a portable medgel applicator. The transparent gel hardened instantly when it touched the skin, forming a flexible, protective layer. "You know," he continued conversationally while working, "most people think battlefield medics have heroic speeches prepared for moments like this. Something inspiring, something dramatic." He paused to tighten a bandage around her side. "I don't. Usually I just say things like, 'Please don't die. I just clean these gloves.'" The woman did not respond. Ryan sighed. "Tough crowd." He checked the scanner again. Her vitals were stabilizing slowly. Good. That meant the serum was doing its job. Above them, a massive shape drifted across the smoky sky. Ryan glanced upward. One of the alien warships was still hovering in orbit, its silhouette stretching like a floating mountain against the dim stars. He squinted at it. "Who designs ships that big?" he muttered. "Honestly, if your spaceship blocks out half the sky, you're probably compensating for something." The scanner beeped again, softer this time. Ryan focused back on the patient. Her breathing had improved slightly, though she still looked pale. Up close, he noticed faint geometric patterns woven into the material of her suit, far more intricate than standard military armor. "Fancy uniform," he noted. "Either you're important, or your army has a much better clothing budget than ours." He adjusted another patch of medgel along her side. "Still," Ryan said, "whoever you are, congratulations. You officially survived today's terrible life decisions." For a moment, the battlefield remained quiet except for the distant hum of damaged machinery. Ryan sat back on his heels and stretched his neck. You know, he said thoughtfully, glancing at the unconscious alien woman, I was supposed to be assigned to a peaceful agricultural colony this year. He gestured vaguely toward the wreckage around them. Instead, I'm here, fixing strangers in the middle of a battlefield under a sky full of angry spaceships. He looked at her again. Frankly, I feel like someone in administration owes me an apology. The woman stirred slightly. Ryan froze. Her fingers twitched. He leaned closer. Oh, good, he said softly. You're waking up. He gave a small, reassuring smile, unaware that the person slowly returning to consciousness in front of him was one of the most powerful rulers in the known galaxy. Hi, Ryan said gently. Don't panic. I'm the guy who's currently preventing you from dying. The woman's eyes opened slowly, as if the act of waking required careful negotiation with gravity itself. For several seconds, she simply stared upward at the smoke-filled sky, her gaze steady but unfocused. Ryan noticed the moment her breathing changed and immediately leaned closer. All right, he said quietly, raising one hand in a calming gesture. Good news. You're awake. Better news. You're still alive. Even better news. You're not currently on fire. Considering the surroundings, that's a solid start. Her eyes shifted toward him. They were sharp, very sharp. Even in the dim blue light of Ryan's scanner, there was an unmistakable clarity in them, like someone who was used to observing a room before anyone else realized she had entered it. Ryan gave a small friendly wave. Hi, Field Medic Ryan Hale. I'd offer a handshake, but one of my gloves is covered in med gel, and the other one touched something earlier that I'm fairly certain used to be a robot leg. She said nothing. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Speech optional, he added. You've had a rough afternoon. Her gaze drifted across the battlefield around them. Broken ships, smoldering machines, distant emergency lights blinking through the haze. Then her eyes returned to Ryan. You treated me, she said slowly. Her voice was quiet but steady. Ryan pointed at himself with his thumb. That would be me, yes. I'm the one applying the galaxy's finest collection of emergency patches and hopeful optimism. She blinked once, processing. You did not ask who I am. Ryan shrugged while adjusting the settings on his scanner. I tend to prioritize breathing over introductions. He passed the scanner across her side again, watching the glowing readout. Besides, he added casually, anyone lying in the dirt bleeding usually isn't in the mood for formal interviews. For a moment, the alien woman simply studied him. Her eyes moved over the med kit, the portable scanners, the bandages Ryan had applied with careful precision. You work quickly, she said. Ryan grinned. That's because my patients have a bad habit of dying when I don't. Her expression remained serious, though something faintly curious flickered in her gaze. You did not hesitate. Well, Ryan said, adjusting a stabilizer patch near her shoulder, hesitation is usually bad for survival rates. She watched him work. Ryan didn't appear intimidated in the slightest. No reverence, no caution, no nervousness that might normally appear when someone found themselves alone with an unknown alien soldier. He simply worked. You're lucky, he continued while checking the medical readout. The puncture wound missed anything critical by about 2 centimeters. He held 2 fingers apart. This much, which means either you're extremely durable, extremely lucky, or the universe likes you. She tilted her head slightly. And which do you believe? Ryan considered it. Honestly, I'm betting on stubborn. For the first time, something very close to amusement touched the corner of her mouth. Ryan noticed. Oh, good, he said. That's a smile. Smiling patients are statistically less likely to die. I'm pretty sure that's a real medical study somewhere. She looked at him for several seconds. You speak often while working. Helps pass the time. And if the patient is unconscious? Ryan shrugged. Then I'm talking to myself, which according to my supervisors is already a confirmed habit. Her gaze drifted briefly toward the sky again, where distant ships still hovered. You're human, she said. Ryan nodded. Last time I checked. You treat alien soldiers the same way you treat your own? Ryan didn't even pause. Of course. She looked back at him carefully. Why? Ryan frowned slightly as if the question surprised him. Because you're bleeding. She said nothing. Ryan gestured lightly toward the battlefield. Look around, he said. Everyone out here was trying very hard to kill each other about an hour ago. My job starts after that part ends. She watched him with renewed focus. And if I had been your enemy? Ryan adjusted a bandage along her ribs. Then you'd be my enemy who currently needs stitches. The alien woman's eyes narrowed slightly. You truly see no difference? Ryan finally looked directly at her. Well, he said thoughtfully, there's one difference. She waited. Ryan pointed at the bandage across her side. Your anatomy is a little confusing. For a moment she stared at him. Then unexpectedly, she laughed. It was quiet at first, almost surprised. Ryan blinked. Oh good, he said, laughing. Also a very strong survival indicator. She studied him again, more carefully now. You're an unusual medic, Ryan snorted softly. You should meet the rest of my unit. I'm considered the normal one. He finished adjusting the last medical seal and sat back slightly. There, he said. You're stable for now. The alien woman's gaze lingered on him. You have still not asked my name. Ryan stretched his shoulders with a small groan. Names usually come later. She raised an eyebrow. When? Ryan gestured vaguely toward the horizon. When fewer things are exploding. Ryan checked the scanner again, rotating the small device in his hand until the blue projection shifted above the woman's chest. Numbers flickered quietly in the air between them. Her heartbeat had stabilized, though it was still slower than what Ryan considered comfortable. He frowned at the display. Your species has a very relaxed opinion about heart rates, he said. The woman watched him. It is normal. Ryan pointed at the projection. This says 52. Yes. That's not a heart rate, Ryan said. That's a philosophical statement. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. Ryan continued adjusting the scanner. If a human heart slowed down like that, he added, I'd start preparing a speech for the medical board explaining why my patient turned into a decorative statue. The woman studied the floating display with mild interest. You worry easily. Ryan shook his head. No, I just prefer my patients alive. He tapped the scanner and the projection collapsed back into the device. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The battlefield remained eerily quiet, broken only by the occasional distant crack of cooling metal. The woman shifted slightly against the broken hull behind her. Ryan noticed immediately. Careful, he said. I am capable of sitting. I'm sure you are, Ryan replied, but your ribs currently disagree with that plan. She paused. Ryan folded his arms. Trust me, he added. Your bones and I had a long conversation earlier. They were very clear about their expectations. She looked down at the sealed wounds along her side. You repaired the damage quickly. Ryan nodded. Portable medgel and stabilizers. Not glamorous, but effective. He leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the ground. You're lucky that transport wing blocked most of the explosion. She glanced at the twisted metal behind her. I remember very little. Ryan shrugged. That's usually how explosions work. Her gaze returned to him again, sharp and observant. You did not search my armor for identification? Ryan blinked once. Should I have? Yes. Why? To determine my importance. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck thoughtfully. Huh. He considered that for a moment. See, that's where battlefield medicine gets interesting, he said. How so? Ryan gestured vaguely toward the battlefield. Let's say I stopped to check everyone's rank before treating them. She waited. Ryan continued. Meanwhile, someone over there is bleeding out while I'm reading a name tag. He spread his hands. Turns out that's bad for survival statistics. She studied him silently. Ryan continued talking while adjusting a small device on his belt. My instructors used to repeat the same rule over and over. What rule? Ryan held up one finger. Step 1, stop the bleeding. He raised a second finger. Step 2, make sure the patient keeps breathing. Then he shrugged. Everything else comes later. She tilted her head slightly. And rank? Ryan shrugged again. That falls under everything else. The woman was quiet for several seconds. Her eyes moved across the battlefield again, scanning the distant shapes of ruined machines. You treat all lives equally. Ryan snorted softly. I try to. Even enemies. Ryan gave a small sideways glance toward her. Well, he said slowly, technically I'm not supposed to ask who was shooting at who. She looked back at him. And if I told you I commanded the forces that fought your people today? Ryan scratched his chin thoughtfully. Hmm. He looked at her bandages. Then I'd say you lost the argument with a missile. She stared at him. Ryan raised both hands defensively. Hey, I'm not judging. The woman exhaled slowly. You are remarkably calm, Ryan chuckled. That's because the dangerous part already happened. And what part was that? Ryan pointed toward the sky. The part where people were firing starship cannons. He leaned back slightly and glanced up at the drifting warships above. You know, he added, I still don't understand why every advanced civilization builds enormous flying triangles. She followed his gaze briefly. It is not a triangle. Ryan squinted. Give it a minute. From the right angle, everything becomes a triangle. For a moment, she simply watched him. Then her lips curved again into the faintest hint of amusement. Ryan noticed. Oh, no, he said. She raised an eyebrow. What? You're smiling again. And? That means you're feeling better. That is bad? Ryan pointed at her with the scanner. It means you're about to start asking complicated questions. She looked almost offended. I have not asked complicated questions. Ryan stared at her. You asked about moral philosophy 30 seconds after waking up from a battlefield injury. She considered that. That seems reasonable. Ryan sighed. See? Complicated. The woman studied him carefully now, her gaze thoughtful. You are an unusual human. Ryan nodded. My commanding officer says that too. And what does he mean by it? Ryan smiled faintly. He usually means I talk too much. For a moment, the battlefield remained quiet again. Then the woman spoke. You still have not asked my name. Ryan looked at her. Oh, he said casually. Right. He tilted his head slightly. So, what's your name? For a moment, she did not answer. Ryan waited patiently, tapping the side of his scanner while watching the faint pulse indicator move steadily across the small display. The battlefield wind shifted slightly, carrying the distant crackle of cooling metal and the faint hum of damaged drones that still hadn't decided whether they were alive or dead. The woman looked at him with quiet curiosity. You ask my name only now? Ryan shrugged. Timing felt appropriate. You did not seem interested before? Well, Ryan said, adjusting a small bandage seal near her shoulder. Earlier, I was more interested in making sure your inside stayed inside. She considered that. That is, practical. Ryan smiled. That's the medical term for it. She watched him carefully for another moment, as if deciding something. My name, she said slowly, is Sela. Ryan nodded once. Sela? Good. That's a solid name. Short. Easy to shout across a battlefield. He gestured vaguely toward the smoking horizon. You'd be surprised how important that is. She tilted her head slightly. You shout patient names often? Ryan nodded. Oh, yes. Usually followed by phrases like, stop moving, and please don't touch that glowing thing. Sela's gaze drifted briefly toward the distant wreckage. Your battlefield seems chaotic. Ryan laughed quietly. That's a polite way of saying terrible. He leaned back slightly and stretched his arms. You should see the paperwork afterward. Honestly, the fighting is the relaxing part. Sela looked at him again, studying his face with increasing interest. You behave as though this situation is normal. Ryan blinked. You woke up on a battlefield. Yes. You're surrounded by wrecked alien technology. Yes. You're talking to a human medic who's currently using emergency glue to hold your ribs together. Yes. Ryan gestured broadly. Then yes, this is a fairly normal day. For a moment, Sela simply stared at him. Then she spoke again. You are very strange. Ryan pointed at her ears. You're one to talk. She blinked once, then let out a quiet breath that might have been another small laugh. Ryan checked the scanner again. Her vitals remained stable. The stabilizer serum was doing its job. Good, he muttered. Sela watched him. You worry. Ryan shrugged. Comes with the job. Yet you joke. Also comes with the job. He glanced at her again. People relax when someone is joking. Sela's gaze sharpened slightly. Is that what you are doing? Ryan thought about it. Partly. And the other part? Ryan tapped the scanner lightly. The other part is distracting you from moving too much while your injuries heal. She looked down at the bandaged wounds along her side. You are manipulative. Ryan grinned. I prefer the term professionally persuasive. For a few seconds, they sat quietly while the dim battlefield lights flickered across the wreckage around them. Then Sella spoke again. You treat everyone like this? Ryan nodded. Pretty much. Even if they outrank you? Ryan shrugged. I outrank bleeding. Sella's eyes narrowed slightly. That is not how most armies function. Ryan snorted. Good thing I'm a medic. She studied him again. Longer this time. Ryan noticed and tilted his head slightly. What? You truly do not recognize me. Ryan blinked. Should I? Sella was silent for a moment. Then she straightened slightly despite the bandages across her ribs. The movement was careful but deliberate. Ryan noticed immediately. Hey, he said quickly. Slow down. Those ribs are still negotiating their union contract. She ignored the comment. Instead, she looked directly into his eyes. You said earlier that important people bleed like anyone else. Ryan nodded. Still true. Her gaze remained steady. Would your opinion change if the person you treated was not simply a soldier? Ryan crossed his arms thoughtfully. He pretended to consider it very seriously. Well, he said after a moment, if you were a general, I might complain about your strategic decisions. Sella's expression didn't change. And if I were more than a general? Ryan tilted his head. Like what? An admiral. Silence hung between them. Then Sella spoke calmly. Human Ryan. Ryan looked at her. Yes? You may wish to reconsider how casually you speak to me. Ryan frowned slightly. Why? She held his gaze. Because the person whose wounds you just sealed with battlefield gel, she paused for half a second, is Queen Sella of the Selenari Dominion. Ryan stared at her. 1 second passed. 2, 3. Then he slowly leaned back and rubbed his face with one hand. Oh, he said quietly. Another pause. Then he sighed. Well, that explains the uniform. Ryan kept staring at her for several seconds after the words left her mouth. The battlefield remained quiet around them, the only sound coming from the faint hum of his scanner and the occasional distant crack of cooling metal. Queen Sela of the Selenari Dominion. Ryan slowly lowered his hand from his face. Okay, he said calmly. Another pause, then he nodded once. Good to know. Sela watched him carefully. That is your reaction. Ryan scratched his chin. Well, yes. You are not surprised? Oh, I'm surprised, Ryan said. Extremely surprised. I just process surprises slowly when I'm tired. He gestured vaguely toward the battlefield. Today has been a very long day. Sela studied him in silence. Ryan leaned slightly closer and scanned the bandage across her ribs again. The device beeped softly. Hold still, he muttered. You just revealed that I am your enemy's queen. Ryan adjusted the medical seal. Technically, you revealed it. And this does not concern you? Ryan shrugged. It concerns my paperwork. Sela blinked. Your paperwork? Ryan nodded seriously. Yes, because now I have to write treated alien queen on battlefield in my medical report, and my supervisor is absolutely not going to believe that. For a moment, Sela stared at him. Then she let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Ryan pointed the scanner toward her shoulder. Good, laughing again. That's excellent. You seem very calm for someone who has just discovered he saved the life of a foreign monarch. Ryan shrugged. You were still bleeding 5 minutes ago. She tilted her head slightly. That is not the point. It's my point. Ryan checked the scanner again. Her vitals remained steady. Good. He lowered the device and looked at her more carefully now. So, he said. Sela waited. You're really the queen. Yes. Ryan nodded slowly. Huh. Another pause. Then he leaned back on his hands and looked up at the dark sky, where enormous ships hovered like silent mountains. You know, he said thoughtfully, this explains a lot. Sela watched him. What does it explain? Ryan pointed at the silver lines running across her damaged armor. The fancy uniform. That is ceremonial combat armor. Exactly, Ryan said. Ceremonial. Soldiers don't get ceremonial armor. Soldiers get ugly armor that smells like recycled socks. She looked down briefly at the cracked plating across her chest. You still treated me without hesitation? Ryan nodded. Of course. You did not know who I was. Still true. Sella's eyes remained fixed on him. And if you had known? Ryan scratched his cheek. Well, I might have complained about the equipment. She blinked once. The equipment. Ryan gestured at his small medkit. Royal patients probably come with better medical tools. For a moment, Sella simply stared at him. Then she said quietly, You are joking. Ryan shrugged. A little. Silence settled again. Sella studied his face carefully. You truly do not see a difference between treating a queen and treating a soldier. Ryan looked at her. Should I? Yes. Why? Because my life holds political significance. Ryan nodded slowly. Ah. He thought about that for a moment. Then he pointed at the sealed wound across her ribs. That wound held biological significance. She raised an eyebrow. Ryan continued. If that puncture had been 2 centimeters deeper, you'd be having a very different political conversation right now. Sella said nothing. Ryan leaned slightly closer. My job is simple, he said. Stop people from dying. He gestured casually toward the battlefield. I leave the galaxy-sized problems to people like you. Sella watched him with quiet intensity. You speak to me as if I am not your enemy. Ryan shrugged. You're currently my patient. And after that, Ryan glanced around at the wreckage. After that, we'll probably go back to arguing with starships. She looked at him carefully. You do not fear speaking this way to a queen. Ryan scratched the back of his neck. Well, he hesitated. Sella waited. Ryan sighed. To be honest, he admitted, I'm more worried about your ribs than your royal authority. For a moment, Sella remained completely still. Then something changed in her expression. Not amusement this time. Something quieter. Something thoughtful. You treated me like anyone else. Ryan nodded. Pretty much. Most beings do not. Ryan smiled faintly. Most beings aren't medics. Sella looked down at the bandages again. You did not bow. Ryan blinked. Should I have? Silence. Then Sella slowly shook her head. No. Ryan relaxed slightly. Good. Because I'm terrible at formal etiquette. He gestured toward the broken battlefield around them. Also, this seems like a very inconvenient place for royal ceremonies. Sella studied him for a long moment. Then she asked quietly, Human Ryan, do you understand what it means that you saved my life? Ryan thought about it. Then he nodded. Yes. Sella waited. Ryan smiled faintly. It means I'm definitely going to need more coffee tomorrow. Ryan leaned back slightly against the broken hull beside them and glanced again at the sky. The massive shapes of warships were still hanging there, silent and patient, like enormous predators pretending to be mountains. Small flashes of light occasionally flickered across their surfaces as distant recovery teams began moving through the debris field. Looks like cleanup crews are waking up, Ryan said. Sella followed his gaze upward. Our fleet is returning. Ryan nodded. Your fleet, our fleet, someone's fleet. As long as they bring transport ships and coffee, I'm not picky. Sella looked back at him. You speak often of coffee. Ryan sighed deeply. You have no idea how important coffee becomes when you've been awake for 22 hours straight. You have been awake that long? 24 if we count the briefing that started this disaster. He gestured vaguely across the battlefield. Briefings always promise organized combat. Then reality shows up and throws a chair through the window. Sella's eyes moved across the wreckage again. You survived. Ryan shrugged. That's mostly luck and a strong appreciation for cover. He lifted the scanner again and swept it across her chest. The soft blue light flickered. Vitals steady. Good. Your recovery is progressing well, he said. Sella watched him. You are checking often. Ryan nodded. I like confirmation that my patient isn't quietly dying while I'm distracted. She tilted her head slightly. You think I would hide such a thing? Ryan pointed at her. You're a soldier. I am more than that. True, Ryan admitted, but soldiers have a bad habit of pretending they're fine until they collapse dramatically. Sella said nothing. Ryan nodded knowingly. See? That silence means I'm right. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then something distant broke the quiet. A low, deep vibration rolled through the ground beneath them. Ryan immediately looked up. "Oh, good," he muttered. Sella listened carefully. "That is a transport engine." Ryan squinted toward the horizon, where a faint glow was growing larger through the smoke. "Yep, definitely a big one." The rumble grew louder. Dust shifted across the ground as the air pressure changed. Sella's expression remained calm. Ryan glanced at her. "Friends of yours?" "Yes." "Good," Ryan said, "because if they start shooting again, I'm officially retiring." The shape of a descending shuttle slowly emerged through the haze, its engines glowing with controlled blue fire. Smaller escort craft followed behind it, sweeping across the battlefield like hunting birds. Ryan whistled softly. "That is a very expensive rescue ride." Sella did not respond. Instead, her posture changed slightly, not in pain, in authority. Ryan noticed immediately. "Oh," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You see it now." Ryan nodded slowly. "Yeah." Footsteps began echoing across the broken terrain as armored figures approached the landing site. Even from a distance, Ryan could see their formation. Precise, disciplined, alert. Definitely not ordinary soldiers. Sella remained seated against the wreckage, watching them approach. Ryan tilted his head slightly. "You're not standing." "I cannot." "Technically you could," Ryan said, "but your ribs would file a formal complaint." The approaching soldiers slowed as they noticed the two figures sitting among the wreckage. One of them stepped forward. Ryan noticed the armor immediately. It was far more advanced than anything scattered across the battlefield. Smooth, dark plating with faint lines of energy flowing across the surface. Elite guard. The soldier's helmet scanned the area before locking onto Sella. Then the soldier froze. Ryan saw the exact moment recognition happened. The soldier dropped to one knee instantly. More soldiers behind him followed the movement. Ryan blinked. "Oh," he said softly. The lead guard spoke urgently. "Your Majesty." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "Yep, that confirms it." The soldiers rushed forward but stopped several steps away, clearly afraid to move too suddenly. One of them looked at Ryan. The gaze behind the helmet visor was complicated. Confusion, suspicion, and a small amount of disbelief. Ryan raised one hand casually. "Hi," he said. No one answered. The guard turned to Sella. "My queen, we feared the worst. Your signal disappeared during the strike." Sella spoke calmly. "I am alive." Ryan lifted a finger. "Minor correction," he said. Every helmet slowly turned toward him. Ryan pointed at himself. "Alive because of me." Silence spread across the group. The guards looked at him again, then back at Sella, then back at him. Ryan gave a small, awkward smile. "You're welcome." The soldiers remained frozen for several seconds after Ryan's cheerful announcement. Their helmets slowly turned toward Queen Sella again, as if waiting for confirmation that the human sitting beside her had not just committed a spectacular diplomatic mistake. Sella looked at Ryan. Ryan gave a small shrug. "What?" he said. "I did the stitches." One of the guards finally spoke. "You treated the queen?" Ryan nodded. "Yes." Another pause. The soldier seemed to be processing several different emotions at once. "You touched the queen without authorization." Ryan blinked. "She was bleeding without authorization." Silence fell again. Then unexpectedly, Sella laughed. It was soft at first, but it carried clearly across the quiet battlefield. The guards looked almost alarmed by the sound. Ryan pointed at her with mild satisfaction. "See? That's a good sign." Sella glanced at him. "What is?" "You laughing means I didn't accidentally glue your lungs together." One of the guards spoke again, clearly unsure how to address the situation. "My queen, we must return to the flagship immediately. The fleet is preparing to reposition." Ryan stood slowly and stretched his back with a quiet groan. "Yeah, that sounds like a good plan," he said. "Hospitals are traditionally better than battlefields." The guards approached carefully, clearly trying to balance urgency with the need to avoid disturbing Sella's injuries. Ryan raised a hand. "Easy," he said. "Her ribs are still fragile." The nearest guard stopped. Ryan walked over and tapped the armor lightly. You pick her up too quickly, and those seals might reopen. The soldier hesitated. Then he looked towards Sella. She nodded slightly. Ryan gestured calmly. Support her left side first. The stabilizer gel will hold, but don't twist her torso. The guards followed the instructions with careful precision. Ryan watched for a moment and nodded approvingly. Good. See? Battlefield medicine workshop complete. As they began moving toward the shuttle, Sella looked back at him. Human Ryan. He looked up. Yeah? You are not coming. Ryan shrugged. I figured that part out. He pointed vaguely toward the distant human medical beacons scattered across the battlefield. My unit is probably somewhere over there yelling my name right now. Sella studied him quietly. You saved the life of a queen. Ryan nodded. Still counts as a patient. You could request transport to our flagship. Ryan scratched his cheek thoughtfully. Well, your medical facilities are probably amazing. They are. Ryan nodded slowly. Tempting. He glanced toward the enormous warship waiting above the clouds. Very tempting. Sella watched him carefully. But? Ryan smiled faintly. But my job isn't finished yet. He gestured across the battlefield where faint life signals still flickered on his scanner. There are still people out here who need help. For a moment, Sella said nothing. Then she spoke quietly. You truly see no difference between saving a queen and saving a soldier. Ryan shook his head. Not really. She studied him for several seconds. Then something thoughtful passed through her expression. You may be the only being in the galaxy who has spoken to me this way. Ryan grinned. Honestly, I'm surprised more people don't try it. You do not fear consequences. Ryan shrugged. Well, you haven't executed me yet. The guard stiffened slightly. Sella smiled faintly. That thought never crossed my mind. Good, Ryan said, because I'm terrible at running. Another moment of silence passed. Then Sella spoke again. Human Ryan. Yeah? When this war ends, Ryan tilted his head, which I strongly recommend it does soon, he added. Sella ignored the comment. When this war ends, the Selenari Dominion will need diplomats who understand other species. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You're recruiting me already? You treated a stranger without asking rank or allegiance? Ryan shrugged. That's just basic decency. Sella nodded slowly. Exactly. Ryan considered that for a moment. Then he smiled. Well, he said, if your diplomatic corps offers better coffee than my military does, I'll think about it. For the first time, the guards looked genuinely confused. Sella laughed softly again. I will remember that condition. The soldiers carefully lifted her toward the waiting shuttle ramp. Just before she entered the transport, Sella turned back once more. Ryan, he looked up. Yes, Your Majesty? She paused. Then she said quietly, for the first time since my coronation, someone treated me like a person. Ryan gave a small shrug. That's because you were. The shuttle engines began to rise in pitch. Sella held his gaze for one last second. Then she disappeared inside the transport. The ramp closed. Moments later, the shuttle lifted into the dark sky, joining the silent giants of the fleet above. Ryan watched until it vanished into the clouds. Then he looked down at his scanner again. Several faint signals still blinked across the battlefield. He sighed. All right, he muttered.